Hi everyone, thank you so much for stopping on this video. My name's Gemma, I'm from activemindfulness.org.uk. I'm a psychologist and a mindfulness teacher and a mindfulness sports coach. Today we're going to be talking about something called the mental training paradox. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it and start to think with you about how to overcome it. So what is the mental training paradox? Well, basically what this is it's a discrepancy that exists between how much we tend to believe that our performance in sport or our enjoyment of sport actually comes down to mental factors, to the psychological, to thoughts, to feelings, to memories, to motivation. So it's the discrepancy between how much we believe these things have an impact and how much time or energy we actually invest in training our minds. So many of us will recognise that our minds play a pretty important role in either enjoying sport or taking part in sport to the best of our ability, in the ability to use our skills when most needed. So this can be true whether you're an elite athlete or someone like me who actually just likes taking part in things like parkrun, the occasional game of tennis, or maybe it's just about getting the will together to get yourself changed from work and out the door and into your Zumba class. You know, in all these things, it's likely that our thoughts will play a role in how well we feel that we can do those things or how much we enjoy them. So humour me for a moment. Take your hands, which are probably on your lap or folded, and put your hand right up if you've ever had the thought, it's too cold, it's too wet, I can't be bothered, I'll just stay here, watch EastEnders, watch a film, go to bed, rather read a book. If that's something that's happened to you, then that's just the mind getting involved in the action, taking its place. That's exactly the sort of thing that we're talking about here. So what's the evidence for this? Well, there are studies that exist. A particular study by some researchers called Lynch and Scott asked elite runners how much they thought that they were impacted by the psychological factors. And they kind of put them all together and got an average. So on average, those elite runners that they talked to guessed that somewhere between 80 to 90% for them was impacted by the psychological and the emotional. So that's pretty high, 80%, pretty high. But when asked if they were training their minds equal to that much, most of them just said no. So this is for a number of reasons. So a lack of time. If you're an elite athlete, you've not got a lot of time. You've got a lot of practice to fit in. It could be not knowing how to train the mind, or even a bit of a distrust of anything that's psychological. After all, let's face it, we live in a culture that values instant results. It values us doing. So if you ask someone who's very focused on doing an achievement to switch from that doing mode, that constant one thing after another, to more of a being mode, to just existing mode, and probably see no immediate effect, that's a big ask. You know, a lot of people are going to feel a bit suspicious of that. But whatever reason people don't really train their minds, often what they do is try to use things like mindfulness to help them, particularly in sport, when they're in their moments where they really need it the most. So if you imagine something like if you're a footballer and you're up for taking a penalty shot, that's a lot of pressure. You need to be able to work with the mind rather than against it. Or perhaps it's something more like, you know, if you're at a running race and even though you've said to yourself, you know, it's whatever I do, it's okay, that's where I am today. Getting overtaken by the man carrying the fridge can have a pretty big effect, or getting overtaken by someone who you recognise you would normally beat can have a big effect. So this kind of idea that you kind of just involve mindfulness when you're in a place where you really need it, that only works if you've put in the practice. So if you think of it as a bit like learning to drive, you have to practice. You have to practice in the car before you feel comfortable to tackle something like the M25 or Spaghetti Junction or anywhere like that, a city centre or anything. So in order to feel comfortable, you have to put the time in and the practice and feel confident. And if you just throw someone who's a learner driver straight into a situation like that, it's likely they're going to be overwhelmed. Their fight-flight response is going to kick in and they're going to panic. So in a nutshell, that's the paradox, the belief that mental training is needed, but the mismatch in how much mind training actually happens. So if you decide that maybe it is something for you, how do you do that? Well, if you think about it a bit like training a physical skill, with training a physical skill, it's all about repetition. So I go to a boxing class once a week, and in that boxing class, I might practice the same punch over and over again. A footballer might practice penalties over and over again. For those of you who are as old as me, you might even remember the original Karate Kid wax on, wax off. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're probably too young. In fact, if you're too young, you might remember the later version where I think it was take your jacket off, drop it, pick it up, take your jacket off, drop it, pick it up, something like that, over and over again. And it's gradually building up the skills. It was building up that skill between the physical and the mind, making that repetition, making your body and your mind work together rather than apart. So it's reasonable to think that if this works for physical skills, it will help you to get better at that skill. So imagine you go to something like golf. So you've never played golf before, but you, for some reason, get dragged to Topgolf, or someone takes you to a driving range. The first time you take a swing, it's probably not going to go that far, if you even hit it at all. So I recently started going to the driving range, which is probably why this is on my mind. And believe me, I've had some really dodgy swings. I managed to hit the ball behind me at one point, knock the tee off the floor, those things happen. But you do get better with practice. I've got better at practice. You'll be glad to know I can actually hit the ball now. So mind training is the same. You get better with repetition. So the repetition here with the mind training is actually practicing. This is why when we meditate, we call it a practice, because that's what we're doing. So you practice coming back to the present over and over again. The way that you do that is to start by finding an anchor, something that brings you back to the present moment. So the most common that you're going to hear most people say is the breath. But you can use other anchors. So sometimes I encourage people, if they prefer, to use something like the soles of their feet on the floor, or perhaps the sounds around you, something that uses your senses and is happening right now, but is also something that will always be with you. So the great thing about your breath and the soles of your feet, whether you're playing a football match, whether you're playing a rugby match, whether you're going for a run, whether you're in the supermarket, whether you're in the queue at the bank, that anchor is with you. It follows you around. So you can always practice. So what we do is when we found an anchor, we just practice noticing it. Just become aware of it. Become aware of your breath as it moves in and out of your body. Actually notice your breath. Actually tune into it. And what's probably going to happen is the human thinking mind is going to say, nah, I want to think about something else. I'm going to think about what I've got to do today. I'm going to think about what I've got to do tomorrow. I'm going to think about my retirement in 20 years. I'm going to think about that time that I embarrassed myself long, long ago. Or I'm going to tell you I'm hungry. or I'm just going to entertain you with reciting things like song lyrics from 10 years ago. I did a practice recently where my mind just felt the need to rehearse the script of the Goonies. I haven't watched the Goonies in so many years, but it's just what came up in that moment. And that's just what minds do. You know, it's not a sign that you're doing anything wrong or there's anything wrong with your mind or anything like that. It's just a sign that you're human. You have a human mind. So what you're going to do is just notice the wandering of the mind. And when you notice, kind of congratulate yourself. You've noticed, you've come out of autopilot and woken up for a moment. And just guide your attention back to that anchor, back to the breath or the soles of your feet, back to the present moment. Sound easy? Give it a try. Your mind might be very busy. It might take a lot of bringing it back to the present. That's okay. Doesn't matter how many times you bring it back, it's all part of the practice. And over time, your mind gets better at this. So maybe better at focusing, but maybe also just better at noticing, hey, my mind's wandered. I'm getting caught up in something, getting caught up in thoughts, getting caught up in feelings. I'm just going to come back. And it helps us to really develop what we call unfreakability. So this is the ability to not get sucked into your thoughts and emotions or your urges just because your mind says to. So to not get sucked into those thoughts of what if I miss this penalty? What if I end up looking a fool? What if I fall over the ball? You know, the kind of thoughts that come up in those moments where you're feeling quite anxious. So what I want you to do is ask yourself right now, how does my mind impact my performance or my enjoyment of sports? How much does it impact? What percentage is true for me? Is it high, like there's elite runners, or is it sort of midway, or is it low? Then ask yourself the question, is it worth me putting some effort into this? Is it worth me thinking about training my mind a little bit more? And if so, start today. Choose yourself an anchor back to the present moment. Just see what happens. Just see what you notice when you bring your attention to that anchor. Let's notice what your mind does. And that's really it. That's the starting point. So what I'll do is I will also post a bit of a link to an audio recording, but you don't necessarily need an audio recording to guide you through returning to an anchor. Sometimes people find it helpful to choose an activity like brushing your teeth, something that you do anyway, and to choose to anchor to a sense in that. So maybe to the touch or to the taste or the smell, and really noticing it. And of course, like I said, your mind is going to wander off, no problem. It's just what your mind does, just guide it back. So have a go. Let me know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook. Let me know in the comments, you know, how you got on. And enjoy. Stay present.